Story 2. Bradford the Bullheaded. Bradford was a strong-willed kid all his life. He was an only child. He was 14 years old now and always challenged his parents and teachers. His mom and dad were beside themselves. They didn't know what to do with him. He recently got suspended from school for playing pranks and setting the chemistry lab on fire. His parents tried everything: counseling, behavioral therapy, everything. Even medication, but nothing worked. He defied all authority. He didn't have very many friends except others known to be bullies in the school, and the only person that he seemed to get along with was his grandmother, Marge. She was a pistol though, and many times his parents wondered if she was more of a negative influence than a blessing. But he always respected her, so even though many times the parents couldn't tell who the kid or the adult was, he and his grandmother had a good relationship. 2 days before Bradford got suspended, his parents were making their final arrangements for their annual week-long getaway. Something that the marriage counselor instilled in them years prior. And they had made it a tradition, though they had long stopped seeing the counselor. It was nice that they had something to look forward to for 1 week out of the year. Despite Bradford's shenanigans the remaining 358 days of the year. They had considered delaying their trip due to the recent suspension, and that Marge was only going to have Brad in the afternoon and evenings for the most part. But she assured them that she was fine with him being at home all day and that any plans she had could wait. Brad was in for his first surprise. On the day that his parents were set to leave, he was confused as to why he was packing his clothes. Marge told him that he would be spending the week at her home. He frowned and remembered that Marge only had cable and not internet, but shrugged it off as he figured that he could use the internet on his cell phone. It wasn't going to be ideal, but was better than nothing. His parents left on a Friday evening. On Saturday, Brad smiled when he woke up and thought to himself that it was going to be a great week with him and Granny. She pretty much let him do whatever he wanted on Saturday, even let him order takeout for dinner. On Sunday it was different. Marge woke Brad up at 9 sharp to get ready for church. He frowned and cried that he was up half the night on his phone, and she shouldn't have let him stay up so late if she knew they were attending church. She didn't argue with him, told him to be ready in 20 minutes and walked out of the room. He gasped with his mouth wide open but shrugged and got ready. The church was as he imagined. There were a handful of young folk, but mostly a senior congregation. He was appalled that the youth didn't get dismissed to attend their own function. They remained in the main sanctuary with the adults. After, the youth asked if he was staying after lunch and invited him along to play volleyball. He thought anything had to be better than going back to his granny's with no internet. They all had lunch in the fellowship hall and played sports after. By the time they got back home it was well into the afternoon. Brad took a brief nap and awoke to a nice-smelling aroma. Granny cooked a down-home country meal: biscuits, gravy, fried chicken, mashed potatoes and greens. He wasn't a fan of veggies, but somehow Marge knew how to make it all come together. She even had a couple of people come over from the church to eat with them. They were older, but Brad didn't mind. On Monday, Brad was awakened to yet another early day. Church again, he thought. No, it wasn't church, but one of the things that Marge did was volunteer her time at the soup kitchen serving those unhoused or less fortunate. It was a very humbling experience for Brad. After, any food, if any remaining, was served to the volunteers, so the volunteers all served one another and ate soup and bread. Brad didn't know what was happening, but he didn't feel angry for once. When he got back to Marge's, they worked on his homework that he had collected due to the suspension. The next day, Tuesday, Brad anticipated his grandmother awakening him yet again for another early day, but it wasn't an early day. Brad pretty much had the morning and early afternoon to himself. Then at about 2 in the afternoon, Marge told him to gather his phone and that they had an errand to run. They went to his school. Marge dropped him off with instructions to report to the lab that he destroyed and that he would be repairing what he could with the direction of the teacher, janitor, and contractor. This was not going to be a 1-hour event but rather 2 to 3 or a few days that week. Brad briefly caught himself thinking he wanted his parents to return so he wouldn't be subject to this manual labor but knew he was wrong for destroying the property. By the end of the week, the same youth that he ate with in the fellowship hall and played sports with on Sunday, also joined him at the school to help him with his repairs. He couldn't believe it. He never had a friend, let alone friends, to do something to help him, to show love and support. He never experienced that before. He was so in awe. By the time his parents had returned at the end of the week, they were in shock about how well the week had turned out. They still had some growing to do as a family but were on the right track. Moral of the story: sometimes when things seem hopeless, don't lose faith. God can change hearts and minds. Proverbs 21 verse 1. We know that only God has the power to change the heart of men. We can only bring them water, but it is up to the man to drink. The Lord can make the man thirsty so he will drink. Parents are not always to blame for the way a child is. Sometimes it's circumstances, a multitude of reasons. But instead of looking back, we must look forward. Brad experienced a lot of healthy emotions and engagements throughout the week. Fellowship, unconditional love from friends, and connection. Things we take for granted when life gets busy. Sometimes in life we get so caught up in trying to identify an issue or problem that we lose sight of one another and basic need of connecting.